can't believe I'm about to discuss this, but I tell you what, I've listened to Ange Postecoglou's explanation of the issues at Spurs, and I find it one of the most enlightening interviews I've seen in many years. I wasn't necessarily a big fan of Ange at Spurs, but how often do we actually get to listen to the manager's side? We don't. They sign non-disclosure agreements, they get a load of money, and there's a reason clubs do that. We've seen it with Amrin, we've seen it with Maresca. You get no say. The press pile on, everything was your fault, you take your money and you have to stay quiet.
So after listening to that, I've got to say, this is bigger than just Ange Postecoglou and Tottenham. For the first time in a long time, we're actually hearing a manager explain what really goes on behind the scenes. And whether you rate Ange or not, what he said exposes a serious issue in modern football, especially in the Premier League.
Yeah. Well, obviously, Ange is out of that period. He sat down on the overlap and he said what he said. Spurs are Spursy. They're not a big club. They wouldn't buy me the players I want.
When he talks about not being backed after finishing fifth, that's the key moment. You finish fifth, you're close to the Champions League places, momentum is building. And instead of strengthening with ready-made Premier League-proven players like Marc Guéhi from Crystal Palace, Antoine Semenyo at Bournemouth, or Brian Mbeumo at Brentford, you're given long-term project signings.
And effectively, it's caused a bit of a backlash. Some people having a pop at Ange, some Spurs fans agreeing, some are not. But this, I think, is not just about Tottenham. I think it's...
That's not backing a manager to compete now. That's planning for a future that the manager might not even be around to see. And this is the cycle. It happened under Mauricio Pochettino. It happened under Jose Mourinho. It happened under Antonio Conte. Now it's happened again. At some point, it stops being about the manager and starts being about the structure. Because how do you expect a head coach to fight in the top four race when he's nurturing 19-year-olds while Manchester City and others are adding finished products?
Indicative of this Premier League fascination with head coaches and boards that take no responsibility. It's happening at Man United, it's happening at Chelsea, it may be happening at Liverpool, it could be happening at Arsenal.
And this isn't just Tottenham. You see shades of it at Manchester United. You see it at Chelsea. Clubs obsessed with long-term resale value instead of short-term competitiveness. Managers get sacked. Boards stay silent. So maybe this isn't Ange being bitter. Maybe this is a manager finally saying what others weren't allowed to say. And that's the real debate.
Or wrongly, the manager is the guy that picks the team, the manager is the guy that gets the results, and if the results aren't good enough, you get the sack. It's Ange out, it's Amrim out, it's Maresca out, it's Frank.
Now this is where the conversation really gets uncomfortable. Because he's absolutely right. We always scapegoat the manager. It's Ange out. It's Amrim out. It's Maresca out. It's Frank out. The chant is always aimed at the man on the touchline. But when was the last time you heard director of football out? When was the last time owners took real accountability?
Out, but it's never director of football out, is it? It's never owners out. There might be a bit of chuntering about it, but they're the decision makers. You finish fifth in the league and you go into the board.
Finishing fifth and then walking into the boardroom asking for specific players, ready players, and being handed projects instead. That's not support. That's sabotage disguised as planning.
And you say, I want this, this, and this, and they go and get you a couple of kids, and then you're responsible for it the following season. They're literally giving you things you don't want, and then for the next...
And here's the brutal part. The manager then carries the consequences. He gets sacked. His reputation takes the hit. Meanwhile, the executives stay in position. That's the cycle modern football has created. And look at what's being suggested about leaks. Because this is something fans don't talk about enough.
Season, you're getting the blame for it while they sit in the background and sack you, and then your reputation's in the mud. I think it's absolutely spot on. And I'll talk about Spurs not...
When a manager leaves, stories suddenly appear. Dressing room unrest, tactical confusion, poor communication. But those narratives don't appear from nowhere. Clubs protect themselves. It's happening at Manchester United. When things go wrong, the coach absorbs it. But who appointed him? Who approved the recruitment? Who signed off the strategy? You can criticize Ruben Amorim for mistakes. That's fair. Managers make errors. But the structure above them cannot pretend they are innocent bystanders.
But I think the bigger picture is so relevant and resonates so much with so many people who aren't even Spurs fans. And it had me thinking, you know what? We sit there, we criticize these.
This isn't about sympathy for managers. This is about accountability at every level. Because if the board builds the squad, chooses the direction, and hires the manager, Then when it fails, the responsibility can't stop at the dugout. And until that changes, the cycle will just keep repeating.
It's this head coach thing, and I don't know where it started, because I think that if you look at Pep Guardiola at Man City, he's obviously got a board around him, and they obviously can overrule him, but whether they're...
And this is the part that really explains why so many big clubs feel chaotic today. Because the modern head coach model has quietly changed the balance of power in football. Managers are now expected to take responsibility for results, but many of them don't actually control the key decisions that shape those results. Recruitment, long-term squad planning, even sometimes substitutions and tactical directions, all influenced from above.
do that? Probably not, because he's a brilliant manager. We had it with Sir Alex Ferguson, we had it with Jurgen Klopp, but the modern fascination of the modern football owner is, I want to make decisions.
So when things go wrong, the easiest thing to do is blame the manager. Sack him, move on, and the structure stays exactly the same. Look at the pattern. One manager leaves, another comes in, the problems remain. Different coach, same issues. That tells you something important. The problem isn't always on the touchline.
I want to make decisions. And we've got these bloody glorified billionaire football managers. That's what we've got. We have. They want to be involved. They don't want to listen to the manager.
Now, of course, managers must still take responsibility. If performances drop, if results collapse, the coach cannot hide from criticism. Ange himself isn't saying he was perfect. His second season clearly didn't match the first, and yes, results ultimately decide jobs in football.
To the manager, they want to be involved, and we end up with a bunch of chaotic football clubs. Tottenham, Chelsea, Manchester United. Chelsea and Man United probably qualify for the Champions League this year.
But what he is saying matters. Responsibility should be shared. Because if a manager asks for experienced players to compete immediately and is instead given long-term projects, then the expectations placed on him don't match the tools he's been given.
But imagine what they could be if they just had managers that were listened to. And that's their problem, this obsession with people above them telling them what to do. I mean, Maresca was basically being told.
And this is where modern ownership becomes a factor. Many club executives want to be heavily involved in football decisions, transfers, squad direction, even tactical preferences. Yet when the season fails, they step back while the manager faces the storm alone.
To sub players off. And he was like, well, I don't want to sub them off. I want to try and win a game, because if I don't win the game, it's my job. And very interesting what Ange said, but
that's why clubs keep repeating the same cycle. Hire, struggle, sack, repeat. Until decision makers at the top are judged with the same intensity as the manager on the sideline, this pattern won't change. And that's the bigger story behind this entire debate.
I mean, I get why some Spurs fans don't want that to be the case, but the reality is, as a Man United fan, I don't think we...
Now, this is the statement that really hit people. Spurs aren't a big club. And emotionally, I understand why that upsets Tottenham fans. No supporter wants to hear their club described like that. But here's the uncomfortable truth. In modern football, being a big club isn't just about history, stadium size, or brand value. It's about behavior.
Behave like Manchester United should. For the last 10 years, Manchester United have been very poor. Over 50% of the last 10 years, we've not even been in the Champions League. That's abysmal.
Look at Manchester United over the last decade. One of the biggest names in world football, but have they behaved like the Real Madrid of England? No. Inconsistent recruitment, poor structure, seasons outside the Champions League. That's not elite behavior. And that's the same accusation being aimed at Tottenham.
Look, we are Manchester United, one of the biggest names in world football, but we don't behave like it. If people said Man United technically aren't a big club anymore, you'd say, well, we're always going to be a big name.
Yes, they have a world-class stadium. Yes, they've got incredible facilities. But how many seasons recently have they genuinely competed at the top level domestically? Finishing outside the top half, relying on a Europa League win to enter Europe, that's not sustained elite performance. Big clubs set standards every single season.
But we probably behave more like Spurs than we behave like Real Madrid. We should be the Real Madrid of England. We should be the Bayern Munich of England. That's the reputation of Manchester United. We don't.
Real Madrid don't celebrate scraping into relevance. Bayern Munich don't accept mediocrity as a cycle. Elite clubs reinforce from strength. They don't rebuild every 2 years. And here's the bigger danger for Spurs. Football evolves. Newcastle United are rising. Aston Villa are progressing. The Big Six label isn't guaranteed forever. If performance levels drop consistently, reputation alone won't protect you.
Behave like that. So Tottenham, why is Ange wrong when he says you're a big club? I don't think you are a big club because you don't behave like one. You've got an amazing stadium. You've got an amazing...
So when Ange says Spurs don't behave like a big club, maybe it's not an insult. Maybe it's a challenge. Because if you operate with cautious wage structures, hesitate in the transfer market, and prioritize long-term projects over immediate competitiveness, then you can't expect to dominate consistently. Being a big club isn't about saying it. It's about acting like it. And that's where the real debate begins.
Spurs got the NFL. Spurs have got Beyonce twerking twice a year or however many times she does a concert. But they're not paying the wages for it either. You get what you pay for.
And this is where the financial argument really comes into focus. Because fans are often told to celebrate reduced wage bills. But the reality is simple. Success in elite football still depends on elite investment. Supporters don't go to stadiums hoping their club saved money. They go hoping their club signed the best possible players.
I think Tottenham are a precarious football club. What they do next, I guarantee that next manager's gone in 18 months. I think that they have...
No one is saying you should hand massive contracts to average performers. But if you want to compete with the very best, then sometimes you have to pay the market rate for world-class talent. Paying top wages to a player like Erling Haaland makes sense because he delivers elite output. That's very different from overpaying players who don't transform your level. And that's where smart recruitment matters.
This identity of they're more interested in trying to stop Arsenal winning a league than winning it themselves. And I think that comes from the top of the football club. And whether Ange was good or...
The concern being raised about Tottenham Hotspur is that the club wants the benefits of being a superpower, the stadium, the global brand, the commercial growth, without always committing to the aggressive football investment required to stay competitive at the very top. And when that gap appears, results eventually expose it.
Bad for Spurs. When you listen to him, his mentality was right. His ideas were right. He clearly may not have been up to delivering those ideas, but he clearly didn't get the support.
You see similar debates at Manchester United and even at Chelsea, where long-term financial strategies sometimes clash with the immediate expectations of winning now. Meanwhile, rivals like Arsenal show what happens when a club aligns recruitment, wages, and sporting direction behind a clear competitive plan.
Either. So I think a lot of what he said was right, and I think the big takeaway for me is he's right. Spurs aren't a big club, and that's a lot to do with how the club's run. I think
because here's the truth. Elite football is brutally simple. You usually get what you pay for. If a club hesitates in wages, hesitates in recruitment, and hesitates in backing the manager, then it cannot be surprised when it hesitates on the pitch as well. That's why the bigger takeaway from this entire discussion isn't just about one manager or one interview.
That resonates with a lot of people. I think even Chelsea fans would have concerns about how they're run, despite the fact they're in the top 5. And I also think
it's about whether clubs truly want to operate like elite institutions, or whether they are comfortable sitting somewhere just below that level while still expecting elite results. And until that balance changes, the same conversations,